Everybody, welcome again, Melanie Deziel, to the Fixed Ops Mastermind podcast. Melanie, so great to have you back.
It's good to be back. It's been quite a while since we caught up.
It was a long time ago. I meant to actually check the date before we jumped on here, but I did not do that. But one thing that I do know is when the first time that we spoke, you only had one book, and now you have two books, and you have that book sitting behind you there.
It's true.
And your new book is something that a lot of people are trying to figure out, right? Which is how to, whether it's a service advisor in a dealership trying to build trust with a customer, or marketers in the world trying to build trust with their audience. So just a very very good topic for people to understand. Because you can't put anything out there, right? You've got to have a focus behind it.
Yeah. So my first book, which I think we talked about last time, is all about coming up with content ideas. And the question that kept coming from that is folks were like, well, where do I start? Like, what kind of content should I start making first? How should I prioritize? And my answer was always, whatever your audience needs to believe to do business with you, that's where you should start. And so that's different for every type of business. But through the course of writing that follow-up book, of writing Prove It, it became clear that there are certain things that trust is like a much more important factor in certain types of decisions or certain types of business claims, and that we can make the biggest difference when we provide some evidence for those. So that's really what that book is talking about. It's like, well, we're all out here saying the same things. I make the joke, like, no business comes out and is like, you can't rely on us. Our products are bad. And like, we definitely won't deliver on our promise. Right. So if everyone's out there saying the same things, that we do what we say we're going to do, we do a good job of it. How do you stand out and kind of provide the proof, the backup to say, like, yes, we're saying the same things, but like, we mean it. Here's the proof.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And maybe it's a marketing strategy for customers for companies to switch to the we're terrible. Don't read them.
Well,
maybe it's stand out.
It's interesting because, like, in this day and age, I mean, I don't want to talk about AI the whole time, but it's like it's a big topic of conversation, right? And I think it's kind of made it so that trust is even more important because people are less sure than ever, like, who can they trust? What is real? What is true? So yeah, it kind of makes it so that you've got it. If you want to stand out, you really do have to you got to back up what you're saying. You can't just go out there like we used to and people would just trust us anymore.
Yeah. So you brought up the big two letter word in everything right now. So let's talk about that a little bit. What role do you think it can play in creativity? I hear all kinds of talk about AI slop and AI writing slop, and honestly, there was a lot of slop writing out there to begin with without AI. For a lot of
now they're just slopping at scale.
Yes, yeah. Now they can just produce more slop.
Yeah.
What are you seeing on the creative side of people using it well, but not maybe leaning on it too much?
Sure. Yeah, I think like any tool, AI is something that can be used to make your work more efficient, more effective. I think where it starts to fail, and we may not always realize this yet because sometimes the effects are long tail, is when we're using it to wholesale replace our own creativity, our own understanding of our customers, our own connection with our customers. Opening up a tool like ChatGPT or Claude and saying, like, hey, write me a blog post about the customer experience. I mean, it'll give it its best shot, but it's going to be the same as everyone else who did the same thing, right? It's not going to be special. It's not going to be human. It's not going to be emotional, right? There's not going to be that connection of content that actually makes a difference. So where we see some really interesting use cases is these tools are actually very good at like gap analysis, because what they're doing is essentially analyzing the frequency of things at scale. If you do write a blog post, for example, and you feed it in and say, what am I missing? What topics are people wondering that I haven't covered? What perspectives did I not consider? What sort of nuances might I have missed? Because it's able to look at the landscape and see what you may have missed. So that's a really effective use case for it. Um, can also use it to like model out your audience. If you help it understand who your ideal audience is, feed it something that you're thinking of releasing and say like, how would my audience react to this? Would they react positively? Would they feel like it wasn't enough? Would they have questions? What questions might they have? So you can use it to really kind of pressure test what you're doing. And I find that to be a much more efficient use than just pumping out content at scale that may or may not achieve your business goals.
Yeah, it's kind of, I heard somebody the other day say that like if you just thought about it as, if I jumped onto your computer, so then I went to Claude and I was like, "Hey, I need a blog post about service departments in the USA not doing a great multi-point inspection," right? It's going to give me something that doesn't make sense because it's you, right? And they said it's kind of like picking up somebody else's phone and starting to scroll through their Instagram feed, and you're like, "What is this? I've never seen this Instagram before," right? And it's the same kind of thing. So you can use it, and that gap analysis idea is a great idea.
Yeah.
Um, but that becomes more useful when you've given it more context around what you're looking for, right? What your gap analysis is and what mine are completely different and not
Right.
aligned at all.
Well, and I mean, I think the best analogy that I've seen is to think of it like an intern and it's new to your team, which means it could be incredible. It might be a wonderful asset to your team, but only if you're going to onboard, you're going to train, you're going to help it understand how things work around here, you're going to help differentiate. Like it needs that information, it needs to be given all of that appropriate context. Otherwise, it's going to come in and just assume it's like its last internship at the fast food place. And like that's a totally different customer set of protocols, different operations than what you're running, right? So you've got to sort of train it to have it be most useful for the way that you need it to work. And I think that's like anyone new to your team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about, because of AI and because there's now so much more content, right? And look, no surprises. I'm a big believer in AI. I use AI
Yeah.
every single day. Um, but it doesn't write everything for me without my ideas in it. It doesn't create images for me without my ideas and input. And most times I end up not using it because it has some stuff that I just can never get right. Right. So you end up going into Canva or something else and doing it anyways. Um, but what it does help me personally do is always have something new. So the not getting stale with creativity is where it helps me a lot. Um, is that something that you see as a problem for other creatives out there?
You know, it could be. I can absolutely see it being a problem. I think where we're at right now is exactly what you described, which is I spent 20 minutes trying to get it to give me what I wanted. It didn't quite hit the mark, and I still had to go in Canva and do it myself. So I think we're still with a lot of creative tasks, we're still at that point, right? Where it can get close, but it can't quite do it well as a person with the experience and the nuance. Um, it's sort of I think there's in areas where there's more of a science to something when we're talking about like coding, there's right and wrong lines of code, there's bugs and there's fixes, right? When we talk about something like creative work, we're talking about, beautiful writing or great design. That's a lot more nuanced. And while there are some hard and fast rules you can fall back on, things like grammar or like basic design principles, there's a lot more art to it than science, and that's harder to prompt out, right? That's harder to include in your prompt. It doesn't have the judgment to know what clean or minimal or, I want it to feel warmer looks like. Those are um, harder to prompt. And so I think we're still at a point where creatives are safe. Uh, One of the conversations I find myself having is that is only as useful of a truth as the decision makers know, right? So if our decision makers believe that whatever AI is spitting out is good enough and they decide not to work with creatives, that's their prerogative, and we'll probably see some fallout from that. Um, I'm heartened by the fact that we've seen recent data coming out that says that the spike in benefits of output when you switch from using, human creatives to just pumping out content at scale is fairly short lived. And what we see is that it rises really quickly because, oh my goodness, now we can make 10 blog posts a day instead of one a week, right? Um, but the value of that content reveals itself to be fairly low by comparison. And so we do see maybe a spike at first, but then it falls off fairly quickly. And
Mhm.
over time, Google and all the other algorithmic overlords that we have to appeal to, they see that this is not incredibly unique or valuable or differentiated content. And so that value kind of tapers off. So that, I mean, as much of a bummer as it is, I mean, that does give me some hope that even the folks who go all in and forsake creatives will see that there's still value in keeping us in that process long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say I'm a supporter of AI, I'm a supporter of humans using AI, not AI for AI's sake and unplugging the human from it because there's there is just too much nuance into almost every single thing we do every day that it's really hard to eliminate the human completely effectively. Eliminate the
Yeah.
human. You can eliminate the human, but you're not necessarily going to get the output
Not a
that you
good
want.
output. Well,
Yeah,
and I think it's helpful. It's like any tool, right? I mean, the same thing. Like a hammer is a very useful tool. Maybe not if you're trying to, I don't know, eat your dinner or brush your teeth. Like that's probably not the best option. But it does absolutely have beneficial use cases, and as long as you're using it in the right places and understanding the limits of its use. Like massage, probably not a good option. Yes, it is. It does involve hitting, but like that's not what we're going for. So it's kind of on us too to learn the limits of like where is this tool incredibly useful and where is it maybe outside of its specialty, and there's other tools that are better suited for what we're trying to do.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great analogy there. Don't brush your teeth with a hammer. It's
Yeah,
not a good
definitely
idea.
not.
Um, all right, so let's move back to the humans and away from the AI. So as I look around, especially most of my time is spent on LinkedIn as far as a social business media. Um, it seems that you start to get a repetitiveness to things, and so what can we do with our own creativity to avoid becoming stale creatives?
Well, I think one of the things that happens is if we're not doing a lot of proactive planning, that's often when we fall into what's comfortable. So by that I mean if most of your LinkedIn content comes because you're on LinkedIn and you're like, "Oh my goodness, it's Wednesday. I've got to post something. What can I do in the next 5 minutes?" You're going to default to the same thing pretty much every time because that's what's doable in 5 minutes or, whatever the reactive situation may be. You're limited by time and resources that are at hand. So, oftentimes, if you're able to plan a little bit further in advance, it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, I'm planning for next week and the week after. I actually have time if I wanted to shoot some photos around, our location, or if I wanted to film a video and get quotes from some of my colleagues, if I wanted to do a behind the scenes, down in the shop, I have the time and the resources to now be able to do that because I'm planning in advance. So, that's probably like my number one tip. And I know it sounds vague, but truly giving yourself a little bit more time to create allows you the time to think differently and try new things and experiment as opposed to being kind of under the gun, under the timer, and you've just got to come up with something quickly. We end up with a lot of what do they call it, broetry, the bro poetry of LinkedIn, where it's just like your deep thoughts of the moment with lots of hard spaces in between, right?
Um, so one of the things that and I typically have my posts all set for the week. They're all put up. I usually put up on Friday for everything coming this week. But one of the difficult things as a pattern to get into is that proactive planning. Like there was a time when I said, I think of something and I go on and I post about it. And that was how I posted. Even though I was posting typically 2 to 3 times a day, it was usually something that I saw, I had an idea and I posted about it, right?
Yep.
But that that runs out of steam. That and it
Yeah,
also becomes exhausting because you
totally.
can see something, have the idea, and go, "I don't have time to write a post right now." And so,
Yeah,
therefore, if you're doing that, you don't have a system to store that idea, and then you
yep,
lose it. So, what
yeah,
is it that what's a system that you found that works to help people sit and actually create those ideas, to take that time and explore this brain up here in our head and actually come up with ideas and put them somewhere in a document so that they can do that
yeah.
proactive.
Well, I think for whatever it's worth, I think a lot of people are in the same boat that you mentioned, where for a long time it's very reactive, right? It's like whatever we think about, that's what we post. And you're right, it's not very forgiving because if you have one day that's too busy to do it, or too boring and nothing exciting happens worth talking about, or God forbid, you're sick or you're on vacation, it's like then nothing happens. So yeah, that proactive planning in advance is really helpful. One of the things that I recommend people do is find a time when you know your creative energy is high. That's different for everybody. Some people are morning people and it's like while you're walking the dog or on your morning run. Some people peak up in the afternoon after lunch and that's the time. So find the time when you know your ideas tend to come and put it on your calendar. Like have that be a dedicated time. This is my ideas time. Not the time when you have to post that moment, but like this 30-minute period, I'm just going to come up with as many ideas as I can. I'm going to remember or write down as many ideas as I can. You can put them in your scheduling tool. You could write it in your notes app. You could scribble it on a napkin. Whatever works for you. Have a time when you know your brain is primed and ready for that kind of thinking and just collect them. This is what we would call batching, right? I like I love taking examples that are from outside of marketing because I think it kind of lets us, take off our hats a little bit and think more carefully. I liken it to doing laundry. Imagine if every time you were going to pick your outfit in the morning, you had to run a wash and a dry with just that outfit. It makes no sense. It's not a good use of your time, right? Which is why we batch it. We save it all up, we put it all in there at once, and it's all ready at the same time, even if we're not going to use it all as soon as it's ready. So it's kind of like doing that with your ideas, right? This is my wash and dry time. I'm going to put down all these ideas so that when I need them, they're going to be ready to go. They're ready to go, and I can draw from them. I can schedule them. I can plan to use it later. So figuring out for yourself, though, is that during morning coffee or on your afternoon walk, or when is your brain going to be primed for that kind of thinking? And once a week or so, just use that time to log as many ideas in whatever system you already use. So notes app, post-it notes, whatever. Use that time to come up with ideas so that they're ready for you when you need them.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I love to hear you talk about like your creative time during the day, because I have listened to forever, like all the leadership books, all this stuff, all talks about you got to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's still dark and nobody's around, and that's how you get work done, and that's the only way that you're ever going to succeed. And I'm like, no interest in
You
being
don't
up.
want to see me at 3. Mm-mm.
Nope, and nor does anybody want what comes out of my brain at 3 in the
Right.
morning to be in a
Yeah.
LinkedIn post, 'cause it's goobly gop, it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so important too is to just recognize like everyone's schedules are different, right? You may be dealing with family stuff, you may be dealing with working odd hours, especially if you're running multiple locations. Like to prescribe that everyone should do this at one time is kind of just unrealistic. So, you know, my recommendation again is to like listen to think about yourself. When are you high energy? Some people are morning people, some people are afternoon people, some people are night owls, right? So follow your own instinct there. Um, and then just make the tools available to you. So again, if you're a notes app person or you're using a Google Doc or a post-it note, an index card, scribbling on the back of your lunch receipt, like whatever works for you, just note that time. This is when I'm going to be ready to capture those ideas so they're ready for me. It's
Yeah.
so much better to make it work for you, and you'll be much more likely to stick with it because it's built for your life and your routine.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm the night owl person. My mind is much more active between 7 and 11 than it is 7:11 PM than it is 7 and 11 AM. And sometimes that's difficult for people to understand. Um,
Yeah.
they wanna meet at 8 in the morning, and I'm like, I'm not ready to talk about anything at 8 in the morning. So, um I love hearing that. Um, also because it confirms my bias that I don't want to be a morning person. So, um, so what changes, if any, have you seen in the creative process and in marketing in general over the past few years?
I mean, not to get back to it, but I feel like AI has been the topic for the last couple of years, just watching the way that the adoption of that has changed our processes, it's changed expectations, it's changed pricing, right? And planning for budgeting because of how much we think these things will or won't cost. So there's certainly been a lot of shift in expectations. I think it's more about figuring out how well those expectations match up to reality, right? Because I think for a long time there was sort of the two camps, the like AI will be our downfall as a species, and then there was the like AI will be our savior, and like we can all just plug into the matrix and everything's cake from here on out. And obviously the reality is going to be somewhere in the middle, so I think we're still, a lot of us, figuring out where that is. Um, but yeah, I think there was a lot of panic up front. People were worried about what would happen, how it would change creative or how it would change efficiency. But I think hopefully we're settling into a place where we're starting to understand where it can help us in terms of making our processes more effective,
Mhm.
and where maybe it should take a backseat to good instinct and the training and experience that whatever industry you're in, like your training and experience, there's a lot you can ride on there, and sometimes that's better than anything you could prompt engineer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there is the doom side and the abundance side of AI. And as my dad used to always tell me, there's two sides to every story, and usually somewhere in the middle is where the actual truth lies.
That's
Uh,
right.
and that's where we are with AI and things. Um, what from a building trust with marketing standpoint, what would you say is the number one thing that builds trust? Is it just consistency of putting out content? Is it consistency of message? Is it having a message that teaches the audience something? Is there one thing that you could point to?
That's a great question. And I think we have some data that we can look to. Consistency is always important. Obviously, I think with anything, right? If you're saying one thing one week and another the next, people are going to have a hard time making sense of it. But I think in general, the most sort of broad application is understanding that audiences now default to skepticism. So there was a point in time in our history where people would believe until you gave them a reason not to. And now the opposite is true. People don't believe until you give them a reason not to. They don't believe you until you give them a reason to believe you. So that is sort of a paradigm shift. Like people are thinking almost opposite. So what that means for us as communicators, as business owners, is we have to understand that we're being held to a higher standard now, and we have to be prepared to back up those claims. So people are looking for evidence that what we're saying is true. Our word alone is not enough. So we need to be looking for ways to bring in other people's word, bringing in some sort of documentation so they could see it for themselves. Or, as you mentioned, like educational content. There's data that comes out of Deloitte that says that educational content does contribute to trust and loyalty, because they think, well, this person clearly knows what they're talking about. If they're teaching me things, I can trust their instincts. So, yeah, that education and calling on outside sources to confirm everything you're saying, it's a great way to show the audience that you're someone that can be trusted.
Excellent. That I remember hearing a lot more in years past, the trust but verify,
Yeah.
the phrase that feels opposite now. It feels
Right.
like verify then trust, right?
Yes, I
Of
don't I
things.
don't have the most up to date data because they redo this study, and I'm not sure what this year's numbers are, but the last I checked it was 59% default to distrust. So more than half, right? So we're looking at the majority of our audience, and probably more, because this was last done even before AI was as prevalent as it is now. Um, Default to distrust, and it's like, let me come in skeptical and then decide if this is something worth trusting. So they're going to make that judgment, and it's kind of our opportunity to show
Mhm.
them, I know you're coming in skeptical. Let me show you the proof so you know you can trust.
Yeah, that creates almost a clear road for how to take your marketing, right? That like
Yes.
make start your marketing with the assumption that they're not gonna believe a thing that you say. right? And
Absolutely.
then
Which I know it sounds depressing. I know sometimes I say that and people are like, well, that's dark. And I'm like, well, it's the reality, right? So
yeah.
I think it's an opportunity for us. If we acknowledge
Mhm.
it, we can plan for it. If we just put our heads in the sand, they're going to go on distrusting us.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. I mean, that's part of marketing, right? Is understanding your audience, right? You can't market
Yeah.
to somebody you don't understand. So if you're going to pretend like they do trust you 100%, then you're probably going to miss the mark. And AI certainly didn't help the trust factor, right? Whether
Definitely not.
intentional, unintentional, whatever it was, the delusions that AI comes up with sometimes makes it so that people now look at content much more skeptically than they did in the past.
Absolutely, and I think it also lends to this fact that they're not even sure which evidence, putting air quotes out there, they can trust. Because I think we've all had that experience somewhat recently of seeing a video or something and then discovering it was AI and being like, "Man, it almost got me. Like, it almost tricked me. I thought it was real for a minute there," right? So, they're wondering if they could even believe their own eyes these days. It's not personal. It's just that it's very difficult to know what's trustworthy anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember at a time I was writing an article and I had written the article and then I had put it through at the time ChatGPT. And I had spent a lot of time with ChatGPT so it would understand who I was. I poured in years of these podcasts, of blogs that I've written, of other stuff I had written so it would
Yeah.
know how I wrote, who I was, and all that, and it came up with a stat that was part of it, fit perfectly with what I had written. I almost posted it, and then I went, "I gotta just look at this," and it had quoted the stat from somewhere, like an actual place where it supposedly had pulled this stat from. It didn't have a link to it, it just said, "From blah, blah, blah," and then I started looking for it, and I'm like, "This doesn't exist anywhere at
Yeah.
all," and I could have posted that, and people would have maybe some would have just read it and believed it, but
Well, what would have happened is somebody would have written an article 2 weeks from then saying, "According to this article, Dave says blah, blah, blah," and then it gets harder and harder to source the original location, they're just attributing it to you if they can't find it somewhere else. It's really tricky. It's really tricky, and it's an interesting time. So before I ever got into marketing, I was a journalist, and so we were taught, I mean, multiple classes on ethics and attribution and sourcing and all these things. And so it's so interesting. I mean, and scary and sad, but interesting to watch how much of that is coming into question now and how those norms are changing and kind of what happens. What's the breakdown of trust when you can't trust those things anymore?
yeah, the attribution point is something I see, uh, across social media in general, but again, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, and I'll see things on LinkedIn that somebody else posted, and I know it's something that I said. That I just watched an Instagram video and I sent it to a buddy, and I'm like, "Does this sound familiar?" And he was like, "That's exactly what you said." And I'm like, "I know." But and there's nobody attributes anything to anybody anymore. And you get the again, my dad ringing in my ear saying, imitation is the highest form of flattery. So just take it and run with that. And so it's not like you're going to go back to every person that uses a quote that you used and went, "Hey, you didn't say that was from me," but it does harken back to why people are skeptical when they hear things.
Absolutely. Well, and it goes the other way too. I mean, if there's nothing stopping AI from someone else's chat GPT saying, "Oh, here's what Dave said," and throwing in a quote that you absolutely never said, right? And just making things up. This is, I think, a fundamental, maybe not most people, but many people have a fundamental misunderstanding of what these tools do. They are not intelligent. They are not thinking. That is not something that these tools are capable of.
Yeah.
They are prediction machines
Yep.
designed to appeal to you, which means they want to make you happy. So if you ask for a stat, it's going to give you one, whether it exists or not, because it wants to answer your question, right? And so that's where it can get really tricky. Is if we give it a little more credit than it's due, it can start to make things a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people just thought about like, just the things that they understand in their lives and why they understand them, it's because you've seen it over and over again, right? It's a pattern recognition. That's how we're operating as a human being, except that we have the ability um to depending on how you feel about free will, we have the ability to change our minds if we want. And the LLM can't change its mind. There is no mind to change, right? It's just here's here's something that I've seen 80 million times, so I'm going to tell him this. And that's it. It doesn't go, maybe that's not what he wants to hear today. Maybe I should tell him something different. There's none
Right.
of that out there.
Well, it's the average of everything it's ever been fed, right? And so that doesn't mean that what it's been fed is true, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean that it's good. It's just the average of everything it's been fed. But yeah, you're right. I think that's another good point too, is that these tools are not, because again, their goal is to appease you, to answer your question, to give you an affirmative response. And
Yep.
so they will not be the kind of thought partner that a person would, because they can't say, I don't know about that, or I'm not so sure that that's correct, or maybe we should try it a different way. It's not going to do that. It's not going to give you the healthy back and forth and push and doubt, and try another way that you get in a normal brainstorm environment, or a normal creative conversation, a normal conversation with your marketer or your colleague. So that, again, the humans win again on that regard, right? Because they're going to have that healthy pushback that brings you to a better idea.
Yeah, they're not gonna give you that trusted friend that goes, "Dave, that is the stupidest thing you've ever said, and don't ever say it again." Instead, chat's gonna go, "That's a great idea.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
Tell the world."
Here's a stat that I made up about how great your idea is.
Oh, boy. So let's talk about what's on the horizon for you. So you got 2 books out. You're
Yep.
speaking on stages all over the world with
Yeah.
big companies. What's next for Melanie?
You know, it's a great question. I think very much the industry of marketing and events, which is where I spend a lot of my time, education and events, in the marketing space, has changed. COVID had a huge impact on all
Mm.
of these things, and now AI is kind of bringing about a new wave of change. And so I think the industry is very much in flux. I know what's important for me is I'm very driven by impact, and I love teaching people. I love getting to share these things and help people feel more confident in their job, feel like they're making better content, because ultimately that's better for the consumer, it's better for your business. So the form that takes may change, at various points in time over the last, 10, 12 years since I've been out on my own. I've taught at the college level. I've done corporate workshops and still do very often. I have courses on LinkedIn Learning. If you're into that sort of thing, you can find my courses on LinkedIn Learning. So I think the format will change. But for me, the focus is always going to be on how can I help marketers and communicators tell better stories and feel better about the stories they're telling. So whatever form, is the format du jour is where I'll be.
I love it. And so if people wanna get in touch, people wanna buy the books, where can they do that?
Yeah, so my website is melaniedeziel.com, just my name.com. And I'm the only one of me. So if you spell it even close to right, you should find me. Has all the information you need, how to work with me, how to have a conversation like this, where you can buy the books. You can buy them on my website. I have a bunch of other resources on the website too, if you're looking for workbooks and worksheets and cheat sheets for these kinds of things. And hopefully you can also find me on your social network of choice. Again, I'm the only one of me, so you'll find me.
There you go. And for the automotive people, it's Diesel with a Z. There's
That's
not
right. That's
there's no
right. But if you spell it with an S, you'll probably find me too. It's a
probably
good
still get
autocorrect. But yes, Diesel with a Z.
excellent. Melanie, thank you so much for being with us, again. And
Yeah.
in the show notes, I'll put a link to our first interview so they can see how much older I got and how much better you got.
Thanks for having me back and let me share my story.
All right, take care.